All right, thanks for joining us again. My name is Jeremy Edwards. I'm the FEMA Press Secretary, here to support the U.S. Fire Administration. They're going to talk about the wildfire problem and a report that the U.S. Fire Administration has coming out about how to prevent that and other issues that are affecting the fire service. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Assistant Director Megan Connery. We're going to go through the program, and then we're going to open it up to questions from our friends in the media. Thanks to you again. Deputy Assistant Director, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeremy. Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Connery, the Deputy Assistant Director with Bureau of Land Management's Fire and Aviation Program. So pleased to welcome you all this morning as the host of the National Interagency Fire Center here in Boise, Idaho. Here at the Fire Center, we are the epitome of interagency cooperation and coordination on wildland fire. Just as wildland fire knows no boundaries across the landscape, we don't know boundaries either in managing wildland fire. As demonstrated by all of the partners here on this West Coast tour, wildfire response across the nation is interagency in nature. It requires a unified, cooperative, and professional response. No single agency can do it alone, which is why federal and state agencies, many with representation here at the NIFC, serve as the logistical support center for the nation's wildland fires, and at times serve in support of other national disasters and emergencies. We rely closely on all of our state and local partners who, in many cases, are located the closest to ignition sources. They can respond quickly and professionally. I am proud to support the U.S. Fire Administration and FEMA as they join in raising awareness about wildland fire issues across the country and throughout the West. Now, it's my honor to pass the mic over to Boise's own Mayor Lauren McLean.
Well, good morning. It's really a pleasure to welcome everybody here, and particularly Dr. Moore-Merrell from the Fire Administration and others that are on this tour of the West to talk about wildfire risk this week. The risk of wildfire is something that Boiseans truly understand. Whether it be, the Table Rock fire that we've seen recently, or our summers where they're getting smokier and smokier from wildfire throughout the West, we know that it's real. And here in Boise, we're continually searching for solutions and making sure that we're doing all that we can to prevent wildfire and to work with residents to ensure that they are ready as well. Because we know that to stay safe, we have to do that. So whether it be working on the wild urban interface, the WUI, it's easier to say, with residents and firewise communities, or you'll see our efforts to support our firefighters to keep them safe. In my next budget, the budget that will be shortly proposed, we'll be proposing 4-person staffing at the station that often receives wildfire calls. And every year after that, we'll continue to increase that because we know that to keep our firefighters safe so that they can keep our residents safe, we need more firefighters on these calls. So I really appreciate all that each and every one of you that is here does to protect our community and to prevent and then protect us from wildfire. And it's really been an honor to be here. And with that, I'm going to pass this back over to Mr. Ritchie, Brad Ritchie, who's the director of the Idaho Office of Emergency Management.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. I'm Brad Ritchie with the Idaho Office of Emergency Management, and it's my pleasure to be here today. I'm standing up here with some incredible individuals that have made a huge impact on how we approach and how we get together to talk about collaboration, integration in handling wildfires across not only the state of Idaho, but across the nation as well. We've been challenged over several years. Idaho is a state that's prone to fire. Understanding the growth that we've had in Idaho and the development in the wildland urban interface is always going to be a challenge that we have to be prepared for. So having people get together in April to talk about some of the new techniques, some of the new technology, the opportunities we have, the people that we need, the support we can ask the communities to deliver is incredibly important. When Idaho's Office of Emergency Management gets involved in wildfire, normally it's about 4 o'clock in the middle of the night. We have partnerships that we've already established, and we reach out to those partners to ask them, hey, what do we need? What's the impact? And what's the short term and what's the long term resources that we need to be able to provide the support to the communities that are needed? You can see that a call at that time of night when we're making those coordinations across the nation is not the time to develop partnerships. Partnerships at the local level for them to understand exactly what they need and how things need to go, the opportunities for the state to take a look and see what resources we have, but also to reach out to the federal partners that we have to be able to look at and see and reach in and grab some of the opportunities they may have for us. Those are always very important. I would like to thank this team here today for all the efforts that they put into it, and I just appreciate the opportunity, even though it's a snowy day, to talk about wildfires coming up in 2023. So thank you. And I will turn it over to Chief Mark Niemeyer, another incredible partner that we have here in Boise.
Thank you, Director Ritchie, and good morning, everyone. Mark Niemeyer, Boise Fire Chief. Happy to be here. Like many in the West, Boise and the surrounding area is not immune to wildfire, especially in our wildland urban interface where homes and wildfire threats meet. In 2008, the Oregon Trail Fire in the city of Boise destroyed 10 homes, damaged 11 others, and took the life of one of our prominent community members. Every spring when these beautiful green grasses turn brown, we're reminded of that threat and that risk. I'm proud of the ongoing work the Boise Fire Department does in mitigating this risk and this threat. We've adopted the Wildland Urban Interface Code, a code designed to limit growth in the urban interface and promote better building construction for those homes most at risk. We've implemented robust mitigation efforts, chipping programs, slope mowing, as well as interactions with our homeowners in the WUI to help them better understand their risk. We engage regularly with homeowners associations to understand risk mitigation and, most importantly, evacuation in the event of a fire. We do capture and use data to help inform us to improve mitigation and response while also understanding climate effects and the overall health of our community. Lastly, and most importantly, we maintain strong relationships locally with our other fire departments, our state and federal partners, the BLM, Idaho Department of Lands, the Office of Emergency Management, as well as a new partnership in the last 12 months with the National Park Service. In order to continue to meet this threat, we must stay active, proactive, and collaborate. We endorse the term all hands, all lands when looking at this challenge. This also requires our community members to stay engaged and active to reduce our risk across all our WUI landscape. All of this work, in addition to the rest of the work we do in the areas of fire suppression, EMS, rescue, technical rescue, etc., can take a toll on our firefighters both physically and mentally. I'm proud of the work our firefighters do to stay physically fit, but I'm more proud of the work our department is doing in the area of mental health and resiliency. Just last week, we hosted a 2-day mental health and resiliency summit that was organized and developed by our firefighters, supported by fire chiefs across the Treasure Valley, had instructors from the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and firefighters and participants from across the entire valley. As the father of a firefighter and the future father-in-law of a firefighter, I'm proud of these efforts, and I'm glad to see they're going to continue. It is now my great honor to welcome our next speaker. She is a visionary, a leader. She is a strong supporter of firefighter health and safety, and somebody that we are all incredibly proud to call a friend, our United States Fire Administrator, Dr. Lori Moore-Merrell.
Good morning. I'm honored to stand with you, Chief Niemeyer, and your state and local officials, as well as the nation's fire service, as we focus on the ongoing threat of fire in our communities. I also want to recognize my colleague from FEMA Region 10, Vince Makovich. Thank you for standing with us. It is a year that marks the 50th anniversary of the America Burning Report that was released in 1973. And we stand here together today as the nation's fire service to tell you that America is still burning. Across the nation, fire is a threat to individuals, to public safety, and it's a threat to our homeland security. In 2022, there were more than 1.2 million structure fires across our country, not to mention the 69,000 wildfires that scorched more than 7.5 million acres. In the last year alone, we lost nearly 2,500 lives to fire, including 96 firefighters. And already this year, there's been over 800 fire fatalities, including 21 firefighters. Every year, as a nation, we experience billions of dollars in direct and indirect economic loss due to fire. The wildland-urban interface is an area where human building development meets or intermingles with undeveloped wildlands and vegetative fuels, fuels that are both fire-dependent and fire-prone. Today, 99 million people, or 1/3 of the U.S. population, lives in the wildland-urban interface environment, yet most of them have little or no idea what the interface is or the danger that it poses. When wildfire enters the interface, the effects on communities can be catastrophic, including overwhelmed response capabilities, tragic loss of life, and socioeconomic devastation. Today, here in Boise, we have precipitation. Unfortunately, the effects of drought will likely soon return, producing dried or cured vegetative fuels that will lead to spread of wildfire. Throughout much of the United States and globally, climate change or drought-driven wildfires are growing in intensity, in size, and destructiveness. In the first 3 months of this year, over 9,000 wildfires have been documented here at the National Interagency Fire Center. The threat of catastrophic wildfire in America's interface community demands national attention and a unified approach to wildfire mitigation and management. Today's approach does not match the scale of this issue. The Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, the U.S. Fire Administration, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Department of Interior are leading the Wildfire Mitigation and Management Commission, along with other federal partners, and we are leaning into the national cohesive strategy, including resilient landscapes, fire-adapted communities, and effective response capabilities. Part of an effective response is early recognition of fire ignition so that resources can be deployed to engage in suppression quickly. To do that, we need technology that provides real-time, accurate information as early post-ignition as possible. We also need wildfire models that adequately predict fire behavior under extreme conditions and within the built environment of the interface. This capability is critical to increasing civilian and firefighter safety. Under the leadership of President Biden, the U.S. Fire Administration, in conjunction with our national organization partners, has launched the National Fire Service Strategy to address the threat of fire in our communities and the ramification on our nation's firefighters. Today, I'm joined by leaders of the nation's fire service, each with their own mission. But today, we speak with one voice. Each of these will address one of the strategies in our national strategic plan. While the overall fire problem in America remains difficult, I'm confident that with the partnerships at the federal, state, and local levels, we can prevent future fires, reduce the suffering, and ensure that more people here in Idaho and across our nation have the knowledge to protect themselves and their families. Now, with that, I want to turn it over to one of our valued partners from the UL Fire Safety Research Institute, Dr. Stephen Kerber, to continue to explain the fire threat in our nation. Dr. Kerber.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moore-Merrell. I'm Steve Kerber, the Executive Director of the Fire Safety Research Institute of UL Research Institutes. In the first 4.5 months of 2023, we've lost more than 800 Americans in home fires. Sadly, that statistic includes over 100 children. While fire can impact anyone, unfortunately, the data show fire disproportionately impacts our most vulnerable populations, the elderly, our children, the disabled, and low-income populations. 50 years ago, a bedroom fire or living room fire could go from a small flame to flashover in 30 minutes or more. Today, a similar fire can reach flashover in less than 5 minutes. Fires have gotten faster. Research has shown this is the result of the synthetic materials used in modern home furnishings and interior finishes. These changes are contributing to the steady increase we've seen in fire deaths in this country over the last decade. Just as the built environment has changed, so too have the items or the fuels we bring inside our homes. Across the nation, we're experiencing fires started by lithium-ion battery-powered devices, such as e-bikes and e-scooters. Both research experiments and fire investigations have shown that if a lithium-ion battery goes into thermal runaway or it's damaged or misused, it can transition from smoking to explosive fire growth in seconds. Fire keeps getting faster. In fact, today you have the least amount of time to safely exit your home in the event of a fire than at any other time in history. This is despite the improvements in technology and our increased knowledge in fire safety. Of course, technologies such as smoke alarms and fire sprinklers must be used and maintained to effectively address fire risk. Research continues to prove ways that people can make themselves savable. Having working smoke alarms, having an escape plan, and using doors to provide that important barrier between you, should you have a fire, to buy valuable time for the fire department to come and rescue you. Building on what Dr. Moore-Merrell said about the growing challenge of climate-driven wildfire on the nation, more than 46 million residences in 70,000 wildland urban interface communities in the United States are currently at risk for wildfire. In the last 3 years alone, over 26,000 structures have been destroyed in wildfires. Of those, 15,000 are people's homes. While research on WUI fires extends and expands and the technology improves, there's a number of science-based actions that people can take for themselves and for their property. To minimize the chance of home ignitions, fuels around the home can be removed, reduced, or relocated. Homes can be hardened or prepared to prevent ignition from airborne embers by taking action on items of their homes such as their roof coverings, vents, windows, fences, just to name a few. As fire challenges in and around our homes continue to evolve, we must continue to work together to develop actionable insights through collaborative research, because fire is getting faster. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the International Association of Fire Chiefs President, Chief Donna Black.
Good morning. As Dr. Kerber said, I'm Donna Black. I'm the president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. According to a June 2022 U.S. Congressional Budget Office report, the intensity of wildfires has increased and has the number of wildfires impacting the built environment over the past 30 years. Recent wildfire events show the ever-increasing danger that wildfire inflicts in the interface. In addition to the threat of civilian injury or death, these events reveal the short and long-term smoke effects on civilian populations that must be considered, as well as the psychological stress associated with these traumatic incidents. Wildfires impact multiple segments of our nation's economy. When these fires move through our communities, they affect the infrastructure and utility sectors. This often includes human elements like communication towers, power grids, water utilities, transportation corridors, and community watersheds. These destructive fires cause business and job loss of community tax base, and the often hidden costs of health-related issues from wildfire smoke. As a national community, we must work to minimize displacement and expedite rebuilding fire-resistant structures using proper building codes specifically for the fire-prone interface area to instill long-term resilience in our communities. The International Association of Fire Chiefs recognizes the importance of addressing community risk of wildfires and has announced the Community Wildfire Protection Plan Assistance Program. We are accepting applications, and 6 fire departments at high risk of wildfire engagement will be selected. IFC subject matter experts will assist with developing or updating their community wildfire protection plan. The selected fire departments will also receive up to $6,000 for a community engagement day and a required in-person tabletop evaluation of their community plan. There is a need for first responders to engage residents in pre-evacuation planning and coordination. Growing fire-adapted communities is a whole community approach that involves everyone, including underserved populations, residents with disabilities, animal owners. Everyone must be incorporated in the preparedness process, not just the government. And as individuals, we must assume personal responsibility and take actions to keep our homes fire safe so that we provide every chance to escape injury or death when a fire occurs. Often that means making ourselves savable for the responding firefighters. Under the amazing leadership of our U.S. Fire Administrator, Dr. Moore-Merrell, we collectively are committed to bring awareness, to educate, and to advocate for changes that make us a more fire-safe America. With a clear and common vision, the nation's fire service leaders will be a catalyst to reduce the threat of wildfire in the interface. Thank you. And it's my pleasure to introduce Michelle Steinberg from the National Fire Protection Agency.
Thank you, Chief Black. 90 years ago, there was actually a standard for fire prevention and protection of summer homes in forested areas. Well, the situation has changed over the last century. We're painfully reminded with each catastrophic wildfire that the problem is no longer summer homes and cabins in the woods, but the places that we have created permanent homes and communities in. Wildfire is devastating not just a few scattered properties, but whole neighborhoods and regions. And while we can only imagine the even greater potential for destruction without the voluntary efforts like Firewise that are occurring in some places, volunteer work alone is not going to get us where we need to go in order to deal with this menace. As we suffer more extreme wildfire disasters in more places, we need to change how we build and where we build. We need to bring together government, first responders, and communities and embrace policy actions that are known to reduce loss. Think about what we've learned over time. Schools, hospitals, high-rise buildings, these were all places of immense loss not too long ago. Code requirements centered around those specific fire challenges have dramatically reduced deaths and property damage in those types of structures. Research shows us that the most successful recipe for fire safety in the built environment is the application of science and technologies through mandated codes and standards, effective enforcement, and an informed public who can take actions against their own risk. It's time to require all homes and businesses in the wildland-urban interface to be more resistant to ignition from wildfire embers and flames. The use and enforcement of current codes and standards, as well as sound land use practices for new development and rebuilding in wildfire-prone areas, will stem this tide. What we see, unfortunately, time and time again, is that communities rebuild in the same way, in the same areas, as those that burn to the ground. Without a new approach, we're destined to repeat history at our own peril against a fierce and unrelenting opponent. We will not stop wildfires from occurring, but codes and standards are the means to better withstand and lessen impact in the wildland-urban interface. Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce my friend Shane Ray.
Well, thank you. I've waited over 30 years of my fire service career for this fire service one voice. And to you, ma'am, thank you. To our U.S. Fire Administrator and to all my colleagues for making this happen. This is not a new problem, as you have heard from America Burning and from President Truman's President's Report in 1947. However, this is the first time in my career that the problem keeps getting worse. The increasing fuel load in our forest and in our homes and our buildings is increasing the fire problem in America. The failure to adopt the latest codes and standards at the local, state, and federal levels is increasing the fire problem in America. The failure to adopt the codes and standards that are established through a consensus process by professionals with all stakeholders involved are a minimum code, and they should not be politically picked apart. The more buildings built to an outdated or weakened code in the interface between the forest and our communities, and where fire departments are understaffed, undertrained, and lack resources, is increasing the fire problem in America. Over 36,000 people have died in this country in building fires since 2010 that lack codes and, most importantly, automatic fire sprinklers. Since then, less than 100 have died in buildings built to code with automatic fire sprinklers. Wildfires are deadly and destructive. However, more people die each year in this country in their own homes than all wildfires and all natural disasters combined. We need better public policy decisions at the local, state, and federal levels to address the fire problem in America. The actions occurring here is a great start. The collaboration is encouraging, and I hope and pray it all continues. May God bless you. I'd like to introduce the Chief of Field Services for the International Association of Firefighters and my colleague, Pat Morrison.
Thank you, Shane. Again, I'm Patrick Morrison. I'm Chief of Field Services for the International Association of Firefighters. We represent 335,000 professional firefighters across the United States and Canada. As our climate changes, populations shift, and the interfaces develop, wildfires, once considered a seasonal threat, are now a year-long reality. The truth, here in Idaho, every wildfire can become an interface fire. And it's not just in the West. Fire departments in every state, every municipality, are coming face to face with this ever-growing threat. We are seeing these fires where we least expected it. In May of 2022, a forest called the Blue Hills Reservation, just outside the city of Boston, saw wildfires 3 weeks in a row. Boston Fire Department, with only structural turnouts, provided mutual aid. That department is trained for all hazards, but they never anticipated a wildfire in their own backyard. A few weeks later, when President Biden asked IFF General President Ed Kelly about pressing issues facing the fire service, GP Kelly explained to him in these words: wildland urban interface training. Training matters. The dangers faced at interface fires are very different from those at structural fires. Boston commander on that wildfire Blue Hills Reservation spoke to me, and he said, "We didn't know what we were doing, but we knew what we were doing was wrong." Unfortunately, most municipalities, firefighters lack adequate training and equipment to operate efficiently and safely in the wildland-urban interface. However, proper, safe operations practices can easily be taught through training. Decisive decisions are critical for a positive outcome, and those early decisions are what is so critical, and those early decisions require training. IFF protects more than 85% of the nation's population. Ultimately, it will be our members who contain and control interface fires, no matter where they occur. The IFF has been a leading force through responding to the interface program, it's the RTI program, in developing new technologies, strategies, and training to improve firefighter safety and competency in the wildland-urban interface. The RTI program provides effective, consistent training for structural firefighters. We must prioritize a federal investment to provide bridge training for structural and wildland firefighters. Over the past few years, we have seen frequent incidents where unprepared structural firefighters were nearly killed when responding to interface fires. The IFF is partnering with the U.S. Fire Administration's National Fire Academy and will soon be hosting a train-to-trainer course for responding to the interface program. And I know we can successfully offer these opportunities to firefighters who protect the almost 100 million people living in the interface. Our oath is to protect the citizens of the nation. If firefighters are not properly trained, the citizenry is not properly protected. By training our firefighters, we are keeping our firefighters safe as possible, and that means ensuring that the civilians are as safe as possible. It's not just fire that kills firefighters. Cancer is the #1 killer of firefighters. Every year, we visit Colorado Springs to etch the names of our firefighters who have died into our memorial wall. Sadly, last year, 75% of those honored died due to occupational cancer. We not only need adequate training, we need equipment that keeps us and the public safe. Our bunker gear, designed to protect us, is manufactured with dangerous PFAS chemicals which poison us. Wherever we wear our turnout gear, firefighters are put at risk with needless exposure ourselves to these carcinogenic toxins. The same gear we rely on to protect us is making us sick. Next generation PFAS gear must be developed, evaluated, and manufactured as quickly as possible. We must act now to establish a comprehensive firefighter cancer strategy that invests in research, provides access to cancer screening for firefighters, and eliminates PFAS and other toxic exposures. The most important thing that we can bring to a fire or an emergency isn't the ladders or the water. It's the people, qualified, well-trained firefighters and EMS personnel. As firefighters, we take an oath. We accept we can die fighting to save lives. All we ask is that you minimize the risk of us dying needlessly. Thank you. I would like to now invite Kevin Quinn, first Vice Chair of the National Volunteer Fire Council.
Thank you, Pat. I come from Rhode Island, and quite frankly, last week we had our largest brush fire in our history. So it doesn't end in the West. It's across the nation. So I'm here to respond to the firefighter recruitment. Sadly, the number of people interested in becoming firefighters is declining. Fire departments across the nation are having difficulty recruiting and retaining firefighters, and in order to maintain services within their communities. Many are requiring mandatory overtime, with firefighters unable to go home after shift. Fire departments that normally receive thousands of applications per year are now receiving only a few hundred. This reduction in people interested in the job increases the difficulty in identifying strong candidates who could be hired to do the job. The reduction in available candidates is even worse in the volunteer fire departments. While there has been a decline in the number of volunteers across America over the past 30 years, call volume has more than tripled, primarily due to increased emergency medical calls. The increased time demands, time-consuming training requirements, and aging communities make finding and keeping new volunteers very challenging. The fire service also struggles to recruit and retain women and people of color. The most recent data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that 11.6% of career firefighters were Hispanic or Latino, 8.5% were African American, and 1.3% were Asian. NFPA reported in 2021 that about 4% of career firefighters were women and 11% of volunteer firefighters were women. Research shows that newer generations have a strong desire to serve their communities and society at large. In line with the United States Fire Administrator's goals, the fire service will build on existing educational programs that appeal to teens and young adults to show the fire service as an option in their career path, as a way for them to make a difference in the world. There are opportunities that exist in both the paid and volunteer departments in their communities and in the Wildland Fire Service as well. Today, we send out a call to those who want to make a difference in the world. We call on you to consider the fire service as an option. Start changing the world by serving in your little piece of it, your community. I thank you. And I'd like to introduce Chief Ernie Mitchell.
Thank you, Kevin. Hey, good morning. I'm Ernest Mitchell. I'm a retired fire chief and United States Fire Administrator, currently serving on the board of the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation and First Responder Center for Excellence. The Fire Administrator's plan for advancing fire safety nationwide is focused on reducing the death toll caused by fire and addressing the need of our firefighters for emergency medical responders. As advocates, it is also proper for us to commemorate the sacrifices of firefighters who bravely serve their communities every day, and most of all, remember those who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Firefighters place a strong value in service to others. Emergency incidents in which they are unable to provide life and property-saving actions, such as entire neighborhoods being consumed in a wildfire, likely increases their levels of stress and anxiety and contributes to the onset of PTSD that affects many in our ranks. In fact, firefighters develop PTSD at a similar rate to military service members returning from combat. About 20% of firefighters and paramedics meet the criteria for PTSD at some point during their career, as compared to 6.8% risk for the general population. It is our collective responsibility to protect healthcare providers who care for public safety officers. Finding ways state, local, and federal governments can do their part are by increasing resources for healthcare providers who care for public safety officers, finding ways to capture accurate data on the prevalence and causes of post-traumatic stress and suicide within the fire service, and providing behavioral health and suicide prevention resources for all firefighters. On August 16, 2022, President Biden signed a bill to provide federal death benefits to public safety officers who, under certain circumstances, die by suicide. This is a monumental step in recognizing the mental health needs of our firefighters and EMS responders. Further demonstrating this commitment, the Biden administration is investing in mental, physical, and well-being programs for federal wildland firefighters. Last week, the first Wildland Firefighter Behavioral Health and Well-Being Strategic Action Planning Summit was held here at the National Interagency Fire Center. These critical actions enable us at the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation and First Responder Center for Excellence in continuing our mission to reduce preventable firefighter death, and will improve the operational readiness of our nation's fire service, and it creates safer communities in our towns and cities. I will now hand it back to the United States Fire Administrator and thank her for bringing us to this point of one voice at this time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm grateful for this opportunity to be able to stand again with these individuals. We'll recognize also that this event occurs in Earth Week, and recognize that wildfire also contributes to greenhouse gases. And so it is incumbent on all of us to recognize the overall impact and the need for prevention as we move forward. So at this point, I'm going to hand it to Jeremy, and we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, if any of our friends in the media have any questions, now's your time. For you raise your hand and we'll call on you. But no pressure. Griffin?
Administrator, you had some pretty strong language regarding the threat of wildfire in the wildland urban interface, saying that today's approach does not match the scale of that threat. And this was addressed by other speakers, but I guess I'd like to hear more concretely. What are some of the changes that you see as necessary to more adequately and robustly respond to this enormous threat?
So one of the things that we have to understand, and you heard it in some of the other speakers, are building codes matter. As we continue to expand this wildland urban interface, we're clearing what was forested areas, we're building homes and businesses there. If they are not built with ignition resistant materials, appropriate roofing, appropriate windows, appropriate vents coverings. All of these things are going to contribute, because just because we cleared the trees or the vegetation does not mean that that geography is not still fire prone, because it is. And so these areas, we want people to understand where you're buying your home. We're watching as this interface day by day continues to expand. And so we have to recognize that this is going to continue. The vegetative fuels around their homes. This is something people can do to make themselves safeable, right? Make it where firefighters can get to. We don't have enough firefighters in this country to address this threat. We cannot get to all of them. We also know from research that where we do get firefighters to a home that's burning in a wildfire, we can protect them. It matters, but we can't get to all of them. So you need to do as much as you can as homeowners, as individuals who choose to live in what was forested areas, that to make yourself safe.
And then just a very brief follow-up. So, I mean, zoning regulations, et cetera, these are global matters, right? So, and you're a representative of the federal government. What is going to be the federal government's role, as you see it, in encouraging these sorts of changes to make sure that communities are ready when these inevitable events occur?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, a lot of the building codes and standards actually are federal. They hand down to states. The states hand down to local communities. And so there's a lack of consistency and implementation of a lot of our building codes and standards throughout the country. And so for us, it is education-based. It is that advocacy for enforcement, for implementation and enforcement. And often in our communities, we have decision makers who choose in the moment to lessen building codes, and particularly after disaster. And that's the unfortunate part, whether it's post-fire or other post-disaster, when we have people who tell us, well, we can build faster and we can build cheaper if you'll lessen the codes. And this is what happens. And so we have to stand up and say, stop. We cannot build something back that's going to burn again. And so we have to have people with a voice who are understanding of the impact of lessening these codes that we know are science-based and matter. We have to stand strong, and we implore decision makers at all levels to stand strong in that space as well.
EMS was brought up, as well as some mental health needs of firefighters and EMS. In our state, EMS is not deemed an essential service. So they get no government funding unless the city itself has created an EMS service. So I guess I'm wondering, what is the federal government's role in aiding those service providers? Many of them are volunteer. So I guess how can the federal government aid those services?
That's a great question. Yes, you are correct. EMS as part of, and we certainly address EMS from a fire-based perspective. Most of our fire departments, in fact, over 95% of them provide EMS services within the scope of the fire department itself. And so expanding that to our single role counterparts in many communities is important. At the U.S. Fire Administration, just within the last 3 months, we have reorganized to stand up an EMS branch in our National Fire and EMS Programs Division of the USFA. And so that branch is going to be designed to not only further expand our education capabilities for professional development for EMS, but also our behavioral health opportunities. We'll continue to partner with all of these organizations. As I said, we stand to speak with a voice about fire. We also stand together. Everybody has behavioral health assets, and we leverage those collectively across the fire service and fire and EMS service. And so we are embracing EMS across the board as well, and we'll make all of these opportunities and resources available to them. You're welcome.
You talked about prevention. When it comes to wildfire prevention, is there a plan to have up like fuel reductions or growing like that?
The question is about amping up prevention capabilities. Yes, I mentioned in my remarks about the Wildland Fire Mitigation Commission. We are in that commission, as you heard, it is the whole of the fire service that are affected with wildfire or have impact in wildfire coming together. And so we are focused heavily on the prevention, because whether it's in the structural environment or in the interface or even in the wildland environment, The best fire is the one that does not occur. Because then we don't have the exposure, we don't have the risk, right? And all of those things. And so that's our goal, the fire that doesn't occur. And so we're really leaning into that prevention model. And we do that by education of those around who live in the interface, again, reducing the fuels around their home, making themselves savable, making that defensible space so if there is an ignition, we can get to it quickly. I also mentioned the technology need. There is a vast technology need, and later on this week, we're going to be standing with a private sector partner who is going to announce something in the technology space. And so that is going to help us. We need technology to spot these fires early, because the closer we get to the point of ignition, we can control fire spread and fire growth, and that stops early. So if we can't prevent it, and often we can't because it's acts of nature, we have dry lightning strikes, all of those things that occur, we need to get close to the point of ignition to suppress. Where there's human behavior that is the cause of ignition, we are still working that problem, and we will continue that through education, advocacy, and grassroots dissemination of information on how to protect yourselves.
Oh, quickly, I just wanted to, if anyone else on the down
Yes.
to speak to the fire prevention piece, by all means, but no pressure.
Anybody else? Fire prevention? Please.
Yeah, I think fire prevention is a key. And I think if you look at any community, the first thing that is cut in any kind of budget sort of operations is prevention. They're the first people that are out. And that is our first line of defense, believe it, before the fire starts, before we have that. So we have to engage the community. We have to educate them. We have to partner with them. They can be such a strong partner with us, but we have to give them the information. We have to give them the training. We have to give them the information they need to make their community safer. So I think prevention is a word. Maybe we underutilized it today, but that is a key word here in trying to get ahead of these areas.
Thanks, Pat.
Before we go to Murphy, did anyone else who has asked a question I'd like to ask a question? All right, last question to Murphy.
I just had a follow-up to, I believe your line was more or less the best fire is the one that doesn't occur. Were you there specifically referring to fires that occur near structures? Because, of course, there's been a lot of research on the legacy of total suppression, and that being one of the key factors in the rising seriousness of wildfires. I guess I'd just like to hear your thoughts on, like, many people say that fire is not just an inevitable thing, but in fact a necessary and good thing. So I'd like to hear just a little more your thinking about
The use of fire. Exactly. Yes, no. And that's an excellent clarifying question. So thank you for asking that. Yes, we do. And many of you, I know I grew up hearing fire to fight fire, using fire to fight fire, right? And that is a key to what we are dealing with, particularly in the wildland space. And so prescribed fire is something that we're looking into from the commission, the greater use, as I said earlier, and I think you asked the question about today's methods don't match the real need, and that's one of them. Because we have a lack of understanding of prescribed fire in the nation. We have a lack of understanding of necessary fire in the country, cultural use of fire across the nation. And so all of those things are good. We need to have those to help us prevent the unnecessary and unwanted fires that occur. So that's an excellent clarification. I'm actually going to ask Megan if you would come perhaps and speak to that as well.
Yeah, excellent question. And I'll echo, building off of Chief Niemeyer's response, that we really have to take an all hands, all lands approach to wildland fire management. And part of that, an integral component of that, is the fuels condition across the landscape, whether it's on federal land or whether it's intermixed next to subdivisions out in southeast Boise. From the federal perspective, we are heavily engaged in fuels management. That may be utilizing prescribed fire across the landscape. It may be using other tools, chipping, mulching, creating fuel breaks, breaks in continuous vegetation, in order to give firefighters an anchor point to work more safely from and hopefully contain that fire more quickly in smaller sizes and with less devastating impact. We can't minimize the role that past landscape management activities and total fire suppression, the 10 a.m. rule, had on the current vegetative conditions. What we can do is learn from that, adapt, recognizing that those vegetative communities are changing, the climate is changing, and we have to develop and stay current using as many tools in the toolbox across all landscapes, state, federal, private, tribal, to work on solving the problem together. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan.
All right. I think that's it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you all for being here to talk about the wildfire problem.